The measure of a society is found in how they treat their weakest and most helpless citizens. That's a quote attributed to, a good many people, from Thomas Jefferson and Mahatma Gandhi to Pearl Buck and Jimmy Carter. Now, whoever said it first, I think it's fundamentally right.
My name is Roy Foden. I'm 75 years of age. I was born in Wallasey on the Wirral Peninsula, and I was diagnosed about 9 years ago with Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia.
Our population in the UK is ageing. In 2022, people aged 65 or over were 19% of the population. But according to the Office of National Statistics, the figure could rise to 27% of the population in less than 50 years.
My name is Joan. I live on the Wirral. My ex-husband, Paul, we split up quite a long time ago. It was probably towards about 2019 when he was finally given a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease.
Older people, understandably, want to live independently for as long as possible.
I try to live independently with Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia. I suppose I've built a vendetta against both diseases. As far as I'm able to, I want to continue living independently.
But when they have conditions like Parkinson's or dementia or other age-related complications, it can be tough on their families.
From the family's point of view, because he lived on his own, I know that our two adult children became quite concerned, as did I myself, obviously. The problem with Parkinson's is that your balance becomes very difficult. Even just the gait that you take on when you're walking, which is more the shuffling, it's so easy to trip up.
I'm science communicator, actor and Liverpudlian Stephen McGann. Now, my mum Claire still lives in Liverpool. She has her own apartment in sheltered accommodation. She's smart, funny, and rightly proud of her continued independence at 90. She has a lot of support, professional and technological, but recently she had a fall. Now, nothing too serious, but it worries us when she forgets to wear that wireless distress alarm we got her. I want Mum to have maximum independence and dignity for as long as possible. I'm intrigued by what technology can offer people like her, but I'm also concerned. I mean, will she be a person that AI can help? Or just a set of data that gets lost between the cracks in the future we're trying to create? This is AI and Us, the future in our hands. A series exploring how AI is changing the fabric of our worlds, with Liverpool leading the charge to understand and harness its power. In this episode, we're looking at social care, how society looks after its most vulnerable, like older adults with long-term illnesses and children in the care system. As well as hearing from Roy and Joan about their experiences, we'll hear from experts about how artificial intelligence could be used to make our social care systems better.
Some of the opportunity for how we can use AI is going to come from sources that maybe feel unexpected, but are already there and available to us.
Gary Leeming, Director of the University of Liverpool's Civic Data Cooperative, who we've heard from in previous episodes.
One example might be the use of smart meter data to help to inform algorithms that can tell us things about our rhythms of life, how we are living. For example, a water meter can tell us when somebody's filling up their kettle or using the toilet. An electricity meter can tell us that they've cooked a meal or made themselves a cup of tea. Those are pieces of information that can be used by algorithms to help to predict whether somebody is behaving normally, that it's within that usual day, or whether there's been a change. And that change maybe could be an example of something where they may be getting ill, have an infection, and need some extra help or support. So for elderly people, people living on their own, single parents with children, all people that could really benefit from how we could collect these types of data together and start to use them in new and different ways. This has to be also about enabling people to live better lives in their own homes for longer.
Even with help from carers, Paul living on his own with Parkinson's was incredibly tough for the family.
I think probably one of the hardest things about anybody being in this sort of situation is the constant worry of that person being on their own. It's never ending because, you have the fear when you open the front door and you don't really know what you're going to face when you get in there. And then you have the same going out. You're leaving them to cope on their own until the next time either you can make it or the carers can make it. And it is relentless. And, the best scenario was just having the carers going in and out when they could. And they did absolutely an amazing job. But it's still this 1 hour calls 4 times a day, which is 20 hours living on your own. And it's a sad situation. And Paul was one of the lucky ones because Paul had a family who cared about him. There's plenty of people out there who don't have that. There was quite a long time when he was living on his own, still negotiating the stairs, still plenty of reasons why he could have fallen over. That was the period of time when it was really very stressful. I think it's at that point that some sort of system to alert us for the possible problems going wrong, that would have been so helpful.
A few years ago, Roy took part in a research project that was working on exactly this sort of system.
I was involved with a research trial through John Moores University, and basically it was this piece of equipment that would hopefully sit unobtrusively in your home, which it did, because half the time I forgot it was even there. So basically the idea of it was to monitor your day-to-day living through 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So basically it was to monitor whether your heating was on, whether you were cooking food, using even a simple kettle. There were sensors on the door that would trigger a system to know whether I left the house when I came back in again.
So Roy had, on top of his microwave, a box about the size of a photo album, maybe a very thick hardback book, with an antenna on it, for 18 months.
It was connected through Wi-Fi to John Moores University, so they were gathering the information 24/7. The idea of it eventually was to, I could use an example where a GP practice, which everybody's linked to a GP practice, that could monitor me as to whether I was sort of getting up in the morning, was I having a shower, whether I was cooking food, whether I was getting a hot drink, whether the heating was on or off. If there was a massive change to that routine, that information would be sent to the GP, and then presumably I would have got a call from the GP, oh, Roy, are you okay, and so on and so forth. Because in principle, the idea was brilliant, where you've got an inanimate object sitting on top of your microwave, gathering all this information. It made me feel safer, even though I have panic alarms and all the rest of it, and friends, people on the end of the phone, and so on and so forth. It made me feel safer. And I thought to myself, well, if this ever does run its course and end up across the whole of the UK in GP surgeries for people living independently with illnesses, I thought, this is manna from heaven. This is brilliant. This box of electronics is helping to keep me safe, which is a nice feeling. I know it's just an inanimate object, but it was an extra avenue of well-being.
Roy enjoyed knowing that this electronic box was ensuring his safety. And the key is that he wanted the box there. He consented to being monitored in this way, and only in this way. The box wasn't there to try and sell him some new service or product based on his activity.
It's also important to recognise that this also needs to be done with people, that people need to opt in, that we want to make sure that they feel like they are using something that is supportive to their lives, that it's not invasive, it's not trying to take their data and invade their private lives. Some of the risks that we face with using some of these new types of data are things that we can just feel as human beings that maybe aren't quite right. Could they be used to market things to us in a way that we don't really expect? Are they being used by a company in a way that is being used to sell us an additional service when actually we don't want that service? So I think there are some sort of obvious risks around those kinds of things. And I think there's also some sort of non-obvious risks. If that data were to be used to impact on somebody's insurance, it could have quite a negative outcome. So we have to basically reflect that the questions of privacy and dignity remain absolutely central to anything that we develop going forwards. And that's really why, as the Civic Data Cooperative, we're really trying to promote an attitude that these things should be done and designed with people that are impacted by those systems.
It's an idea we've come back to again and again in this podcast. And this episode is no different. We, as people, citizens and patients, absolutely need to be involved in any decision-making about how our data will be used.
Another aspect is, as we're collecting all of this data and making all these judgments, we could potentially find ourselves in a situation where people are deciding things for other people on the basis of this. They're deciding that somebody is no longer able to live alone when they themselves feel that they can. And we have to decide, how are we as a society going to manage that? For one thing, it could unnecessarily increase the burden on our social services. The algorithm could tell us that somebody is no longer able to live in their own home, that maybe they're at greater risk of a fall or something, but they in themselves feel like they are able to make changes for themselves that could mean that they stay at home for longer. Actually, there are maybe better solutions to this problem by working as a community to help with a neighbour. And we have to learn how to respect that. We can't simply have algorithms that impact on people's lives without taking into account their concerns.
And what about the risk of bias? We already know that artificial intelligence can be biased because it's being trained on particular data sets. And it can only work from what it knows.
This comes up and has come up quite frequently in the use of algorithms and AI in the government particularly, because it's basically learning from what has gone before. But there are also things that we don't, I think, currently have the tools to properly understand in their entirety right now. If we have an algorithm that's being trained to support somebody in their home environment, is it being trained on a particular lifestyle? And maybe with different families, different communities, we would actually see different types of behaviours that actually would be negatively impacted by that algorithm. And we don't know what the answers to all those are. We have to just kind of, I think, be aware that the framework that we have for using AI and using data in these ways has to come with a recognition that we can be wrong and that we have to keep an eye on it, and we have to maintain how we are able to monitor the impact of the work that we're doing and ensure that we're also listening to people in terms of the design of these algorithms and AI.
What we do know already is that the need and desire for this kind of technology is only going to increase as our population ages and more older people continue to live independently. Here's Joan again.
I think from my point of view, everything that happened with Paul has made me very aware of how vulnerable I could be at now 75 years of age, and obviously getting older every day. Anything can happen at any time. I have had a conversation with Suzanne, my daughter, saying that, I just wish there was something that wasn't intrusive, that would allow me to carry on living as long as possible on my own, but without putting stress onto her or my son Richard. I don't want them having to constantly be worrying about, we haven't spoken to Mum today, is she okay? I just think that would be a really valuable tool to have for anybody who's in my position.
Sadly, the research project Roy was involved with ended after 18 months. Now, this is another big issue with research projects that get limited funding. Even if the idea is great, and even if it works, it's not always able to be scaled up to the needs of the country, or it doesn't get the funding to do so. We don't know why exactly this project didn't keep going, but the researchers took the box back, and that was the end of it.
I always thought, oh, something's really going to come of this, because it's such a simple idea. It was there to protect me and potentially thousands of other people in my position. So it did annoy me a bit, yeah. Sounds silly, really. It was just a box of electronics, wasn't it? But it was more than that. It was like having it was like an electronic friend. That it might sound odd, but it annoyed me a bit when it went. It was a security blanket, yeah. It was taken away from me.
It's possible that in the next few years, with the increased processing power that AI offers, these kinds of interventions could become more available.
With AI and the future, it's not going to help me anymore now, but you have to be concerned with future generations. This could be my daughter, my son. So we've got to move forward, haven't we, and use technology to help people to stay at home, living independently as far as possible. So it's not just me. I've got to think of the future in this crazy world.
Of course, I believe that children are the future. Another idea we've all heard before. And again, I think for good reason. And this brings us to another area of social care, where artificial intelligence could bring really big benefits. Children in care. Sophie Clark is the Managing Director of We Are Juno CIC in Liverpool, a not-for-profit organisation that runs children's homes. They've got 2 homes currently open, and they're about to open a 3rd.
We Are Juno CIC has been set up to provide children and local authorities across Liverpool City region with a network of homes that should support really positive outcomes for children. So we're really focused on the quality of care and how we create teams of really loving, well-trained staff. We're also trying to develop a way of working with local authorities so that we co-design services together to make sure that our services are really meeting local demands, so that we're helping keep children in the local area. As a not-for-profit organisation, we are charging a really fair fee to local authorities, and we're really transparent about how that funding is used. The money that we charge to care is really being invested into children and staff. We did a lot of the co-design work with care experienced young people.
Which just means people who have been through the care system.
3 or 4 bed homes came out really loudly as like the ideal size. Too small, and you kind of feel like the spotlight's on you, and there's a lot of pressure, and for the provider it brings more risk if things don't work. We do the matching really carefully, so ideally there's someone living with you who shares your interests, maybe a similar age. They're family homes, beautifully decorated. It's really important that children feel valued. Everyone has their own bedroom. All of our homes have got ensuite bathrooms as well, so children have got privacy and a sense of their own place. And we open homes and communities where there's loads going on for children, where children feel safe and can connect with other organisations locally who can support them.
So how could AI benefit children in care? Sophie thinks a big area could be in planning and predicting across a local area when children may need a place in a home.
Local authorities have all got a statutory responsibility to create what's called a sufficiency plan. So that looks at the numbers of children in an area. It pulls out data about their needs. And I think there's a real opportunity, handled very carefully and sensitively, for AI to help commissioners and people responsible for planning care in the future to understand the needs of children, and some of that kind of more future-facing work around not only what do we need today, but what might we need in a year, 2 year, 3 years' time, based on what we can see playing out for families in our communities.
At the moment, there are a lot of limitations regarding data in children's services. Each local area may record the same data in different ways. and it's hard to put that information together to understand regional needs.
So whilst, organisations like Ofsted have got that regulatory responsibility to register homes and to track children's journeys through that system, there isn't currently a mechanism so that you can say, today, this is how many children we have got, this is where these children are, this is how many placements are available. Individual local authorities will know exactly how many children they've got in care, and they will know today where those children are and what they need, but it's the aggregation of that data that I think is really difficult, particularly from a regional perspective when we're trying to plan for the future. As a provider, opening a new home, it's really challenging. It can take 18 months, 2 years to find the right staff, to find the right property. You might need to renovate that property. You can easily find yourself in a space where what they've needed 2 years ago might be very different to actually what they need today. So if there was a way that AI could help bring that real-time data closer to providers, I think it would help ensure that ultimately we're shaping the services that are going to be needed, in years to come.
And Sophie reckons that artificial intelligence could not only solve problems for the care system itself, it could really benefit the care workers and the young people in care themselves, because it's able to manage so much information.
For children growing up in care, there is an awful lot of record keeping, what the child does in a day, what they've had to eat, what their aspirations are, challenges that they might be facing. All of this has to be recorded under the Ofsted regulations. That can be really time intensive, and particularly, for us as a residential provider, the priority is that relationship and being together and doing things together. And if there was a way that AI could help that record keeping process be smarter, faster, the young person more involved in that record keeping and telling their story, you could see how that could make it a far more empowering and beneficial experience for young people. I think it'd be interesting to explore how AI could help improve the quality of record keeping. Often staff, they're busy, you might have 4 children in your home and lots happening. If AI could help prompt staff to think, have I been really clear? How do we record this information in a way that is child-centred, knowing that at some point in the future, many of these young people are going to be reading these records, and we've got to capture their strengths and the complexity of what's been playing out around them. I think it could mean that, ultimately children are left with a higher quality record of their life and what's been happening for them.
So, artificial intelligence could not only help with the record keeping, freeing up staff to spend more time with children and less on paperwork, it could actually even make the paperwork better for the child by prompting social workers to use different words or framing. Now, this is a really big issue, because for a lot of young people in care, getting their records back can be an incredibly traumatic experience. These records are written from social workers, adults' perspectives, and they're often full of judgments and opinions.
At the moment, when a young person leaves the care system, if they decide to request their records, it's an incredibly difficult, really harrowing and upsetting experience for many, many young people. You're met with thousands of pages of records about your life under a microscope. You might not recognise some of that narrative. You might not agree with some of that narrative. And if there was a way that AI could help condense some of that information, help pull out all those moments when young people have done something really remarkable and give that kind of strengths-based lens to that experience, it could fundamentally change how young people perceive the journey that they've had to go through, with the caveat of it needs to be done really sensitively. And I think children and young people would need to be involved in the co-design of what it looks like.
So it sounds like AI, used in this way, could be an incredible tool for social good. But it's not going to be easy to bring this technology into this field.
I think there are lots of barriers. Children's residential care, its history is paper-based, and we have to record everything. But typically that's been done, children have a folder and it's all kind of pen and paper. The Children's Act, which sets out a lot of the legislation around how we work with young people, it was written in 1989. So, well before mobiles, internet. And so the legislation is literally decades behind, which can make keeping children safe in that context very, very difficult for staff in the sector. Even the use of quite basic technology, i.e. mobile phones, is really challenging in children's social care. So I think lots of providers are already helping staff get confidence around using programmes that in theory should make the job faster and free staff up to do the kind of child-facing work. It's not straightforward, and you can face natural resistance when you're bringing in tools that staff haven't worked with before. And obviously there are loads of concerns out there already around, AI in the context of sexual risks, particularly for vulnerable children. How might their information, their images, confidential information be utilised by others in a way that's going to put them at risk of harm is a huge worry. I think there's a lot of risk relating to who owns that data, who sees that data, where does that data go. Even things like the address of where young people are living, we treat very, very cautiously. There is a lot at stake, particularly when we're trying to apply technology to really vulnerable members of our community.
And another problem is bias. Often the assumption about young people in care is that they won't do well in life.
We've got a group of care experienced people who've been through this system and who guide us in terms of what's going to make this better. Their frustration with the narrative that is pumped out about, the number of young people who end up in the criminal justice system, the number of young people from the care system who never, go on to get employment, mental distress, whilst of course there is truth, like lots of young people who've been through that system struggle because we haven't got it right for them. But there's another story, and there's lots of young people who do outstandingly well. And I think it's really important that we'd have to eliminate the bias from the data so that the information, the tool, the resource, it's helping create something genuinely empowering and helpful for the young people and families who've been through this experience.
In the next episode of AI and Us, The Future in Our Hands, we'll be looking at how AI might impact music and culture. Do join me, Stephen McGann, for the next episode of AI and Us, The Future in Our Hands. AI and Us was written and produced by Nija Dalal-Small. The executive producer was Ailsa Rochester. AI and Us was an Audio Always production made in collaboration with the University of Liverpool's Civic Data Cooperative.